obviously, in addition to all of the NBA stuff and the big one between Oklahoma City and Boston, and of course, all the college basketball that's coming your way over the next few days, the NFL has taken center stage because it's what they do. They take over the middle of March with their free agency period. So there's a lot to dive into as far as who got better, who got worse, what moves moved the needle, what moves didn't necessarily move the needle. And we are not going to bore you here with the minutia, ladies and gentlemen, boys and girls, of breaking down this defensive tackle went here and this offensive guard went here. We're not going to do that for you. We are going to break down, though, who we like and who we don't based upon these last few days. So, Joe House, I'll let you start the proceedings. NFL free agency, what moved the needle to you right out of the gate?
So I'm looking at two teams that were both playoff teams last year, and they both made moves that I think enhance their overall ability to either stay where they were or move a little bit forward even. And I'm looking at both the Minnesota Vikings, who I really like with their defensive tackle, the signings on the defensive line with Javon Hargrave and Jonathan Allen. And then the offensive line, they brought in both a new right guard and a center, and they re-signed a couple of key pieces. And so the big question mark with the Vikings is what's going on at quarterback. But if it's the case that McCarthy is competent at all, I'm looking at the FanDuel Sportsbook, and I think I'm going to do something with their 21-1 odds to win the NFC. And the reason I'm looking at that is not because I think they're going to win the NFC, but because it creates an enormous hedge opportunity if they're able to run it back. Now, it's a leap of faith with McCarthy. It's a leap of faith with Kevin O'Connell. The other team that really impressed me was Denver. Denver grabbing two guys from San Francisco, key defensive guys in the form of Dre Greenlaw and Hufanga, the safety. And then they signed Evan Ingram at tight end. And we know how important tight end is in the Sean Payton offense. That guy might be a real safety blanket for Bo Nix. Those are the two teams. And Denver's available in the AFC conference for around 20-1. So I'm going to probably put a little bit on them as well. Again, not because I think they're going to win, but because I like the idea of the hedge opportunity it creates.
Okay, Raheem, I'll throw it to you. Now that we're like 2 days into this thing, House loved what he saw from Minnesota, loved what he saw from Denver. If there's a team or a move that kind of really moved the needle for you, what was it?
It's by far the Chicago Bears. First things first, you go out and you get Ben Johnson, who's the offensive coordinator for the Detroit Lions. And then after you get Ben Johnson, you shore up the offensive line. You get Joe Thuney, you get Drew Dalman, you get Jonah Jackson to solidify the interior of the offensive line. And one of their biggest weaknesses was they couldn't block for Caleb Williams. And Caleb Williams, he had a lot of bad habits. I mean, he would, drop outside of the pocket and run into sacks. You look at the Bears last year, they were 16th in pass block win rate. And you look at Caleb Williams, he had a 12.4 pressure to sack rate, which was the worst in the league. So with that offensive line getting better, you have a solid offensive coordinator. I think they've made moves to solidify themselves as one of the best teams, not only in the NFC North, but in the NFC as a whole. And they also got Montez Sweat to rush the passers. So I think this team is really live to make some noise out of the NFC.
Well, here's the problem, though, Raheem. Everything you said is factually accurate. I think it's valid. I think it's fair. And I think it's within reason. However, I have a little fear factor with Caleb Williams. I just do. After what I saw last year, and I understand you're going to say, hey, he's in a better system now. That's true. Hey, he has a better offensive line. You know what, Raheem? That's also true. I totally get it. I am concerned about his ability to function and run a play when it's not backyard football. It's a concern I have. Now, he may go out and throw 45 touchdowns this year, and it may be, hey, the talent's there, he's harnessed it, he's grown, he's ready to go. But can you understand why I, for one, and I didn't get involved with the Bears last year, full disclosure. I did not like them. I played them as an under. I did not buy the hype at all going into the year. But can you see why I have some of that
I totally agree.
PTSD? You get it?
I think his pressure to sack rate says it all. And I think if you go back to his days at USC, he picked up a lot of bad habits. basically the offensive line wasn't good and he'd run outside of the pocket and play backyard football. But in the NFL, you can't necessarily do that. So I think Ben Johnson, I have a ton of respect for Ben Johnson, and I think he's going to get rid of some of those bad habits. And I think if Chicago can actually run the ball this year, I think that can help him out. So maybe he doesn't play as much backyard football. Maybe he doesn't find himself in as many 3rd and longs this year. So I'm buying into the Chicago Bears. I like to buy into these quarterbacks still on their rookie deal. And if they go sign a wide receiver, I think that puts them, at the top of the division.
Gents, I got to weigh in here on a team that I have from a takeaway standpoint. I'm looking to sell. The San Francisco 49ers. You want to talk about an exodus. This has been an absolute exodus across the board on both sides of the ball. And before you tell me, how much does Deebo Samuel have left? We'll see in Washington. But they lose Kyle Juszczyk. They lose Greenlaw. They lose Ufunga, who ends up going to Denver. They lose guys on that defensive line. Raheem, they were a team that had a lot go wrong for them a year ago. And the books priced San Francisco very steep, very, very steep as far as a team that can go and make a move forward once again, year from hell type of vibes. I have a hard time believing San Francisco now. I'm not saying they can't be a good team. I'm not saying they can't be a playoff team. But with what has transpired for them here in this offseason, they don't look like a Super Bowl caliber team out of the NFC. There's too many holes now all of a sudden, Dream.
I think you have to ask yourself if Kyle Shanahan is capable of raising the level of this offense, if Brock Purdy is capable of raising the level. Because to me, a lot of people, we looked at Brock Purdy as a guy, as a system quarterback, a guy who thrived because of the pieces around him. Now, Brock Purdy, he's gotten paid. He's there, and they lose a lot of guys like Deebo Samuel and Kyle Juszczyk, and obviously Brandon Ayuk is still recovering from that ACL, MCL injury. Can Brock Purdy raise the level of his team? Because if he can't, 49ers aren't going anywhere.
Yeah, the only thing with the Bears and the 49ers that we have to start, put into the mix is, it's early, but their schedules, the 49ers, because of where they ended up in the NFC West, have a schedule where they're projected to be favored in 12 of their 17 games. And the Bears have a brutal schedule. They only have one road game, it looks like, where they're going to be favored, and that's against Vegas. So those will be elements that we'll start layering on as we get closer and closer and start seeing some win totals come out.
No question. And we know House is a king of the schedule. When the schedule comes out, he likes getting in the lab. We have a little fun with win-loss. I mean, it's a tradition unlike any other. And it just goes to show you sometimes, hey, the teams that you expect to be good and it ends up being a gauntlet at the end of the year, it's accurate. And then there are other instances where you thought maybe the Jets and Cleveland last year were going to be good teams, and they ended up being dreadful teams. So it is year to year.